Not exactly hidden. A tiny hand puts a nail into place and the slight tap of a hammer sticks it in enough that the little hand is removed before the second, firmer blow follows to drive the nail all the way in. This process repeats itself 4 times as the child tries to ignore the whispers and rumors. The video was making the rounds already, even though the official release of it was in 2 days. They were already calling him the judge of the doomed, the judge of the damned, or sometimes just the judge. None of the sorcerers liked it, but at the same time, none of them were under any delusions they could really stop it. Everything was a stall for time. Cal's Tarn needed to be able to be with his family to properly grieve and heal, but his growing notoriety was going to be a problem, especially with the fact that some older Aput girls were watching. Oh, they never got too close. One of the men was always right nearby the kid, but they were there. It takes just a bit for the trimming to be in place and secure before Bernard places the new window in its frame and then takes some of the screws Cal's Tarn holds out to him. He then secures it in place even as the young sorcerer peers out and sees some watching Apuk in the distance. He ducks out of sight in response. "Not liking it?" Bernard asks him. "Girls are weird," Cal's Tarn replies and Bernard nods. "Let me finish this up and we'll head to the forest. We're not going to be followed in there," Bernard says, and Cal's Tarn nods. It takes a few minutes to finish securing the window, and they walk a bit further into the building and away from the prying eyes outside. "Cal's?" the boy's stepmother asks. It was kind of hard to mentally think of what to properly call the other wives and such things, at least from the child's perspective. Stepmother fit the best. "We're taking him into the forest. His stalkers are getting a little over the top," Bernard says, and Cal's Tarn nods a bit. "Oh, darling, you don't have to worry. You've done so much already. We lost so much, but we would have lost more if not for you," she says, kneeling down to his level and putting a hand on his shoulder. "Although you will want to come back later today. Kale is in an expedited healing coma and will be waking up soon." "Really? He's going to be awake that fast?" Cal's Tarn asks with bright eyes. "It's not going to be pleasant, but he'll be up soon," she answers. "Excuse me, I seem to have missed a trick. What is an expedited healing coma?" Bernard asks. "A much more axiom-intensive healing coma. They take only a fraction of the time, but are so disruptive on the local axiom that having more than 1 or 2 in a moderately large area will lower the axiom density to dangerous levels. To those that pay close attention to the axiom, an expedited healing coma can be sensed from many kilometers away," she says, and Bernard considers before closing his eyes and focusing. His eyebrows climb up as he hears a howling noise similar to a gigantic drain of water pouring away. "Interesting," Bernard notes. "Healing comas are fast and thorough, but there's a faster version, just one that's completely unsubtle and can only be used sparingly. Useful. Of course, the guys back on the Dauntless no doubt know about it already, but having it in a report is still a good idea." "Are there other side effects?" "Kale's not going to be feeling very well for a week or so, but it's better than him not being here when he's needed," she answers before returning Cal's Tarn's suddenly firmer hug. "I miss Mom," Cal's Tarn mutters. "Oh, sweetheart, I do too. Thera Tarn was a wonderful woman," she says in response as she hugs him back. "Here is my contact code. I'll be with Cal's Tarn all day, but we need to get him away from the stalkers. The last thing he needs are crazy women stalking after him when he still needs to sort out his head." "Yes, that's a good idea. Keep him safe, please," she says, and Bernard nods. "That's the idea, ma'am. Please call us when Kale Tarn awakes. Cal's seeing his father would be a good thing," Bernard says. "I would have done so regardless," she says before looking up sharply, even as Bernard turns to glare at the figure who just ducked out of sight. "Disrespectful little brats, aren't they?" Bernard says. "We'll be all right. You've all done so much already," The landscape around the town is so healthy and alive that rebuilding is a fairly simple matter, she says with a smile. There should be cracked and shattered roads, craters and burnt-out refuse all over, and nothing but the dead as far as the eye can see. We're still alive. We endure, and our enemies are dead and buried beneath us. Not even their tracks remain, and while we have buried many and have much to build, we can rebuild.
Glad to be of service. Now, come along, Cal's Tarn. Bernard says, even as his glare sends a stalker scrambling. You're free to visit whenever you want, even if it's just to get your socks cleaned, she promises, and Cal's Tarn nods with a sniff. It's not a farewell, child. You're just gaining another home. You will very shortly be able to make the trip alone, and until then you will have one of us nearby at all times to help. Bernard assures him, and Cal's Tarn nods again. Okay, let's go, he says, and Bernard offers his stepmother a slight salute before both of them vanish in a wood walk. With both of them gone, she rises up and marches to the recently installed window to lean out and grab the stalker by the hair. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she demands in a rising fury. They re-emerge upon the grass of the village, and Cal's Tarn is quiet and thoughtful. "Come on, sit by the water and let your thoughts wander. It helps." Yeah, okay." Cal's Tarn agrees, not really able to forge much of a protest. There's a hollowness to him when he doesn't have something to do or focus on. It's better than being always angry, but not by much. When he was angry, he was doing something, and there seemed to be a point to it all. But now? No, not really. He sits down by the water and just stares. Bernard starts laying out a cloth and goes through the process of cleaning and maintaining his gun as the kid thinks. This, of course, draws Cal's Tarn's attention, and he turns from watching the water to watching Bernard put everything back together. "It feels pointless, doesn't it?" Bernard suddenly asks, and Cal's Tarn looks up from the methodical bit of weapon maintenance to look at Bernard's face. Once your anger is spent, when you've got your revenge and cried out your tears, you're left feeling empty. "Yes, I'm empty." Cal's Tarn agrees. "You feel empty. You're not actually empty," Bernard corrects. "I've had to bury some family myself. The empty feeling goes away quickly enough. This will pass. It's a normal and natural part of grieving. Can you make it go away faster? It's not something you should try to force. Grief, like other powerful emotions, is a complicated and funny thing. Sometimes you can ignore it and it solves itself. Other times you can do everything in your power to fix the problem and it just leaves you feeling emptier than before." "Then what do I do?" Cal's Tarn asks in an almost desperate tone. "What you're doing now, kiddo. You have to feel your feelings, even when it's not fair," Bernard says as he empties out his magazine and then checks it to ensure it's in complete working order. "Life doesn't just stop when you need it to. It keeps going and moving, because that's what life does. It lives, even when you don't want it to." "Then why are we here and not back home?" "Because while life can't be ignored or avoided, stalkers are another matter entirely. Someone leaked the video of what we did to those 5 wretches early. So now we have all sorts of Apuk women from all over the world realizing there's a young sorcerer who no longer has an object of vengeance. The danger is past and all that remains is the prize. The prize that normally they have to bleed for. It's selfish, it's childish, and it's just plain greedy. So if they want you, they have to deal with the entire dark forest and its sorcerers," Bernard says, and Cal's Tarn seems to wilt. "Nothing's ever going to be the same again, is it?" he asks as Bernard finishes cleaning and maintaining his weapon and then reloads the magazine before slotting everything into place and then placing the weapon back into its armpit holster. "Yes, but that isn't a bad thing," Bernard says, folding up the slightly dirty cloth and tucking it away. He then rises and looks down on Cal's Tarn. He then smiles. "Death must be confronted, but life must still be lived."
He holds out his hand to Cal's Tarn, who slowly takes it and in just a few moments finds himself on the man's broad back before he starts rushing along the grass to build momentum. Your world is so much bigger now, and there is a beauty to it still. He wood walks and they're suddenly on the massive branch of one of the colossal trees. Cal's Tarn gasps to see exactly how high up they are. It's a dizzying height, and the winds of the world push and sway the living towers, even as Cal's Tarn is carried by Bernard along at a sprinter's pace. Whoa! This is part of your world now, as huge as it is. As big as this is, as tall as we are, and it's still a tiny bit of a gigantic galaxy, Bernard explains before jumping off the road-sized branch and they start to fall between the trees. Life surrounds us. Life is part of us. We are alive, and until we're gone, we are never done living. A vine twists out of its normal position and into their path. Bernard grabs it and they start swinging so fast that the wind howls in their ears. Cal's Tarn grips hard onto Bernard and he laughs. You're fine. You're safe. There's nothing to fear. Why are you doing this? To show you, Bernard answers before he wood walks too on top of the uppermost leaves. There's an enormous gasp of shock as Bernard slows down and just walks over the ocean of gigantic leaves. Each one alone is strong enough to hold them both up. Gigantic or not, an ocean of green leaves shimmering in the wind below a clear blue sky, and a bright day is a beautiful and bright thing. Behind them, the central mountain stands tall, a snow-topped boulder in the grass. Cal's Tarn slips off Bernard's back and looks around. Then, when one of the leaves tilts to make itself even easier to hop onto, he does so and Bernard slowly follows, letting the child wander in wonder. Yes, you have loss. Yes, there is an emptiness. But there is so much more out there. So much beauty that it won't stay empty for long. It hurts, and it should hurt. You've been hurt, and that hurts. But hurts don't last forever. You have to pick at them and reopen old wounds if they're to keep hurting. The pain will pass, it will fade, and you will grow stronger, Bernard explains as Cal's Tarn just stares over the ocean of leaves and onto the central mountain. I'm not done, Cal's Tarn says as he stares out. No, you're not, Bernard answers. My family is still alive. I'm not alone, Cal's Tarn says, looking back with tears in his eyes. No, you're not. My home still stands. No Dock isn't destroyed. Cal's Tarn is starting to smile. Yes, it stands. But it still hurts, Cal's Tarn says with his expression falling. That will fade in time. Only in time, Bernard says, and Cal's Tarn just holds his gaze for a bit before nodding and sniffing. He then sits down and just looks out over the tops of the trees and tracks the high-flying birds. Why does it have to hurt? Cal's Tarn asks after a while. Because it mattered. If it didn't matter, it wouldn't hurt. That's not fair. No, but it is something everyone has to deal with. Which also makes it one of the fairest things there is. Grief and pain are very fair in their unfairness, Bernard says, and Cal's Tarn gives him a confused look. I don't make these weird rules, I just live with them. Cal's Tarn snorts in amusement at that, and Bernard lets out a hey. This seems to break through something, and the child begins to slowly laugh before laughing harder and harder. Then it trails off and he just stares out. Feel better? Bernard asks. A little. I think I'm not so much empty as just feeling too much to feel it, you know? Oh yes, I know. You got feelings about what happened and feelings about those feelings and of those feelings. It keeps going for a while because there's just so much to feel. Sleeping helps. That way you can feel your way through in dreams. Bernard offers and Cal's Tarn nods a little. Then there's a slight growling sound. The man grins in response. Maybe after lunch though. Sleeping on an empty stomach usually isn't fun.